Hey y'all, what is going on? What is going on? It's your girl, Melba Pearson, Melba from Miami, Melba for Justice, also known as the Resident Legal Diva, and it's time for another Mondays with Melba. So, it is Black History Month, and the theme of this Black History Month is going to be Brothers on the Ballot, right? So, I always do what I can to uplift, Black men, African American men, Afro Caribbean men, men of the diaspora that are doing positive things. But I always like to take things back to the history. And, when it comes to history, it is all about Senator Dwight Bullard, Florida Rising, of the Florida legislature, of all things real, all things hip hop, and all things like brilliance. Okay. So I wanted to have a discussion with him today about a little bit about the history of how Black people and especially Black men ended up running for office in this country and some of the unique challenges they face, especially as we're transitioning into the 2024 electoral cycle. So, Dwight, thank you so much for joining me again on Mondays with Melba. I appreciate you so much, my brother.
Listen, I always appreciate the invitation, Melba. Since the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air left the airs on Monday nights, Mondays with Melba has really kind of like taken that position. So I appreciate you for using your platform for the good.
Oh my god. Okay, yeah, that's like the best ever. And there's like a whole other funny side note because there was like a new clip on socials talking about when Denzel Washington made a surprise pop up. And
Absolutely.
actually, no, that was a different world. But
Different world,
anyways, kind of
yeah.
genre, and I was like, so just thinking about that genre of just comedy was amazing. Anyway, moving on, getting back to the topic at hand. Can you give us a little bit of history about Black men running for office, especially around the Reconstruction era? Because I almost feel like that was the golden age of Black men in politics in some ways, but I'm willing to be wrong on that. So please share your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, for a lot of people who don't fully appreciate what that period of time meant for Black history, for American history, it was really kind of Shangri-La to a degree of what America could be. For those who don't uh, understand the Reconstruction period, that was the period directly following the end of the Civil War up until 1877. This was a time period in American history where we were really kind of pushing this notion of the experiment of the possibility of the thing. You had kind of immediate Black political power because you had Black men that were given the right to vote via the 15th Amendment, and really kind of exercising their political power in some of the most, prolific ways possible. So around the country, and just kind of give a national perspective, and then maybe bring it back to Florida, you had 13 members of Congress elected in that time period from all the southern states. These are the first Black people to actually be in Congress, all being elected from the South, because you had a federal protection of the franchise. You had civil rights bills being pushed out. You had two Black U.S. senators elected. And just to give people perspective, you had two Black men elected to the U.S. Senate in that short span of time. Since then, there have only been five Black men to serve in the United States Senate since then, right? And we're talking about that many years. So y'all do the math on that. And then you even had at that time a Black governor elected. Now there's an asterisk on that because PBS Pinchback out of Louisiana was elected to as governor, but was not able to serve, due to some politics and folks not allowing him to be sworn into office. But that just shows you the magnitude of Black political power in this very short period of time. And I know a lot of people who get on the bandwagon of does my vote count really need to look at that period of time, because remember, this is just Black men voting in the South, where you had kind of the greatest concentration of Black people. And just in that moment, when all things are clicking and all the cylinders and the trains on the track together, where you have the federal government saying you deserve the right, you have Black people exercising that right, and you have this kind of like magical moment in history where you're getting Black people elected statewide. And that's not even I don't want to disregard people being elected to positions like mayor, city council, postmaster general in some of these spaces, and being kind of significant contributors to the greater American experience during that time period.
Yeah, I mean, and again, just I'm still at point A and thinking about only 5 Black men have served as senator basically since Reconstruction. And two of them we know pretty well, Senator Cory Booker out of New Jersey and Senator Barack Obama, who out of Illinois, who then became president. Exactly. So, and then there was the brother out of Massachusetts.
You have
Republican.
You have Edmund Senator Burke out of Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. You have Tim Scott in South Carolina.
How did I forget about him?
I mean, he can be forgettable sometimes. Raphael Warnock, of course, out of Georgia. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there was a Black man appointed to finish Barack Obama's term in Illinois, but he was not elected to the U.S. Senate. So 6 have served, 5 have been elected since Reconstruction. And so, let those, again, I want people to really do the math that 2 Black men were elected to the U.S. Senate between 1865 and 1877. And since 1877 to 2024, there have only been 5.
And when you think about the 5, I mean, Senator Burke was more like 80s, 90s, but everybody else was like, late 90s, not even 2000s. These are all.
Don't give Senator Burke 80s, 90s. He was elected in the late 60s, early 70s. So we're talking about way, way, way back when he was the only Black man at that time serving in the United States Senate. And then after him, you wouldn't see another Black senator to Barack Obama, which would be another 30 years. So there have been some significant gaps and a lot of, unfortunate. And then when we think about Florida, since we're both here in Florida, right. Mm-hmm. The unfortunate reality is since Reconstruction, with the exception of Governor Wilder in Virginia, there's been no state in what was the Confederacy to elect a Black person statewide. Mm-hmm. So we're talking Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana, and the like. So the South really does have some significant work to do in terms of representation.
And so what are some of the unique challenges that face Black men that are running for office? Now, I can speak as a Black woman who has run for office and the challenges I face, but again, there is a whole different set of challenges that Black men may have to deal with that are separate and unique from white male candidates, Black female candidates, white female candidates. So I'd love if you could draw a little bit on your experience, especially running for state Senate. Your situation, I know, is a little different, but, if you can kind of talk to some of those things, because I think folks may be not privy to a lot of what goes on behind the scenes and what folks have to do just to get in office.
Yeah. There's a particular stigma attached to Black male representation, at least in a broad-based perspective, right? And there is this, and I mean by stigma, and it's not lost on people who study a little bit of history, that there's always been an antagonistic relationship between the larger white society and Black men in particular, right? This notion of, Black men being violent, Black men being less than, Black men not being as intellectually prominent as their white counterparts. And so those stigmas and those tropes still have, carry out through a number of different professions. You know this in the legal field with the percentage of lawyers that are Black men. This kind of notion of just black men not being enough. Historical notes like the Tuskegee Airmen, a lot of people are just like, we look now and like, all right, anybody can be a pilot. But there was junk science and politics related to black men not being able, not having the cognitive skill set to fly a plane, and people, publishing actual documents in support of that junk science. We know that to not be the case, but the idea of it continuously being reinforced. And so that really carries over into politics, just that sentiment, that idea. I mean, you look no further than Birth of a Nation as a movie when it first came out, and a depiction of black men in politics, and what that represented. I mean, and to put it in a historical context for folks, Birth of a Nation, up until very recently, was the highest grossing film of all time when you correct for dollars to dollars, right? I think Titanic was actually the film that beat it out. Just to give folks an idea of how popular this movie was at that time, even being viewed in the White House with Woodrow Wilson. So you got to think about that, kind of happening over time, and the concept and the idea of what black male political presence means. And so it's been a difficult and been very challenging. And as I mentioned before, when we're talking about statewide office, when we're talking about outside of the context of your quote unquote black districts or historically black districts, it's been a challenge. It's been a challenge in a lot of spaces. I mean, in the continental 50 United States, there have only been 3 black governors, right?
One of whom being Wes Moore, governor of Maryland.
Wes Moore, governor of Maryland, Douglas Wilder are the 2 elected, and then of course the former governor of New York, who wasn't elected but happened to serve out a term. And so these are the kinds of things that when you think about, and the reason I bring that up is because Mississippi, 36% of the population of Mississippi is black. 32% of the population of Louisiana is black. I think 28% of the population of Texas, black. 22% of the population here in Florida, black. And I bring these numbers up not because they're the majority, but when you look at what we call black access seats, those are the numbers folks look at to say, can a black person be elected in those spaces? And so when you think about that in context, there should have been a black governor or a black senator elected from those states. When you think about Detroit as one of the blackest cities in America, Detroit's never elected a black governor or a black U.S. senator. Currently have a black lieutenant governor, but those kinds of things matter, and people need to understand. And I simply say that in the context of this fight around diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Yeah. Where you have those people saying, well, people should do it on merit, or there's, why do we have to look back at the history of the challenges that this country's faced, and why can't we just look forward? And for black folks, it's like, we've always tried. We've been attempting to look forward,
right?
For forever. But you're saying that you want to base it on merit. Cool. Then give somebody a chance. Then why haven't we? Because it's not a question of qualification.
Right.
It's not a question of desire to want to serve. Why won't you give folks a chance realistically? And what ends up happening is those same tropes come up. I mean, and even when you have, black statewide candidates appealing to the right, the most extreme right-wing notion of the country, people still say, well, wait a minute, Daniel Cameron in Kentucky, right? Like, you can say all the right things, you can align yourself with all the right, extremist ideologies, but one could argue that even in a state like Kentucky, which by no means is considered a blue or left-leaning state, that your politics didn't matter. in comparison to your skin color, is what people are going to argue, right? And so these are the kinds of things that people really need to ponder and think about in terms of their own self-evaluation.
Right.
Like, I think for anyone listening, ask yourself the question is, what would keep you from electing a Black person or a Black man into office? Have you ever had the chance to, if given the chance? And people will sit there and kind of make up all kinds of arguments, but at the end of the day, it boils down to, quote unquote, their comfort level. And I want people to really kind of lean into what they mean by comfort. Like, what is it about the presence of a Black man on the ballot that makes you uncomfortable? Because if you dial that back to some trope or some ideology or some concept that you grew up on because your grandfather or grandmother passed it down, that's the thing that you got to unearth. And that's the thing you really got to dig up out yourself in order to open your mind to the possibility.
And I mean, I actually want to end on this point because that is so, so incredibly powerful, that the reality is we have to unpack our own biases. And this is not just for, white people or Latinx people or whatever, or we all have grown up with biases and been programmed to believe certain things. And, and self-hate is real. So, before you have that gut reaction of, you know what? I don't want to give so-and-so a shot. Think about why. Like,
Right.
Is it a matter of an issue with their platform? Because if it is, then it is what it is. But is there something else that's driving it, that's making you afraid that if this Black person gets in power, if this Black man gets in power, is he going to do XYZ? Is he going to take my guns? Is he, where are you coming from on this? So I think that's a powerful call to action that all of us need to engage in as an exercise, especially in this critical year of our Lord 2024, where there's a ton. There's primaries, there's, there's a presidential primary, there's the primaries for our local offices, and we have, of course, the presidential election in November. So we really have to be looking and checking for these biases as we prepare to either vote by mail at home or go to the ballot box and vote. So with that, Dwight, thank you. Thank you for always educating us, educating me, because every time I sit and learn, I just sit and just learn from you, because you just be knowing stuff. So but Dwight, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on Mondays with Melba this week. And to all the viewers, just know that I'll be bringing on some candidates, some Black male candidates who are running for office, to hear what their plans are, what their platforms are, and what they hope to accomplish for our community. So y'all take good care. Bye.